Mary Ellen?
Yes, I did. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. I am tape recording this meeting with the town's digital tape recorder for the record. I'll start with a roll call because there's so many members here that are on the phone. I want to make sure I get everybody. So for the record, my name is John MacDonald. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Management Commission. In the room with me at this time, to my left is Mike McGee, our secretary. Mike is here. Terry Lewis, also on the dais. Chris Staub is another of our alternates on the team here. So we have Mike McGee, Terry, and Chris Staub here in the room. On the phone, I have Harry Plout, the harbor master.
I'm here.
Tom Meyer.
Tom's here.
Tom's here. Mark Beatty. Mark Beatty.
Mark's here.
Mark's there. Jeff Meinke.
Jeff is here.
I also want to everyone here. People, I mean, I guess you could say people said it about Obama. But everyone just refers to him as Trump, whereas like before the President Bush.
Somebody speaking on the phone. Please mute your system when you're having a conversation. Thank you. Bill Harris on the phone.
I'm here.
Is George Finley on the phone? George Finley's absent.
George had said, yeah.
Go ahead. Mary Ellen?
Yes, and George had said he would be absent.
Okay. Is Robert Folgera on the phone?
Bob's here.
You are there, Bob.
Yes, I am.
Okay. We have a full house here. I'm going to take this opportunity to seat Terry Lewis for George Finley. You can vote at this meeting.
Hey, John, this is Jeff.
Yes?
As I have not been terribly involved in this whole thing, I would be comfortable having an alternate sit for me, that somebody that might be more up to speed with the concept.
Jeff, that's a good point. On a special meeting, there has to be a continuity of attendance. And in this case, I appreciate you recognizing that. So we'll seat Chris Staub, who's here in person, for Jeff Meinke. So that's for the notes, Mary Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
John, to that point, this is Tom Meyer. John, quick question.
Yes, Tom.
To the point you just made about continuity of attendance, I was not in attendance at the last scheduled meeting where I know there was discussion of this topic. Does that mean that I should recuse myself from this meeting, or how do you want to work that?
Well, I'd like both you and Jeff to participate, and we do already have a quorum. That is only a question to me if it comes down to a split decision by one vote, but it's not absolutely necessary to recuse yourself at this time. If you want to, at the time of voting, if you want to stay and abstain, that's fine, but I'm not sure that we need to be that technical, because there isn't going to be enough background here for us to come to terms with this recommendation. But I appreciate,
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so we have the roll call. I'd like to move on to the clerk's report and approval of the December 8th minutes. We normally approve these minutes in March, but since it's timely and it's on the agenda, we can look at them and approve them now. Are there additions, omissions, or corrections to the minutes? I think these were very complete minutes. I've read other boards' minutes. I have to comment that they're very complete and they're well done, Mary Ellen. Can I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Mike McGee has made a motion to accept. Terry Lewis has seconded. All members, voting members in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes are accepted. Thank you. Okay, we're here at a special meeting of the Harbor Management Commission. The Harbor Management Commission was tasked by the Board of Selectmen to make recommendations regarding Tandem Landing. The brief, concise history here is there in the fall of 2020, we received some complaints from the public regarding the placement of rocks that barred the access to the town property in the right-of-way. The Harbor Management Commission on December the 8th discussed the situation in regards to the rocks, the access. We also looked at the usage of the right-of-way, signage.
This is the new guy.
Yes, I am the new guy. I'm John McDonald. Okay, so please put your speakers on mute when they're not actively speaking. Thank you. So on December the 21st, the Board of Selectmen discussed Tandem Landing, and from my participation at that meeting, there was a unanimous intent of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Griswold, Mr. Kerr, Mrs. Nozel, that said the access has to be restored and the rocks should be moved. And that was a piece of business that took place at that December 21st Board of Selectmen meeting. After that meeting on December the 29th, on a visitation to the site by myself, Terry Lewis on the commission, and First Selectman Mr. Griswold, we went down to the site and the rocks indeed had been moved. Our thanks to Mr. Frampton. On January the 5th, Tandem Landing was a discussion topic at the Conservation Commission. There were some ideas put forth there by the commission, and I participated and I gave them a draft copy of our recommendations by email. I did not participate in person. That leads us to tonight. We noticed the meeting about a week ago. We published the draft recommendations. They're here tonight to be discussed. And that's our status as of tonight. I'm going to turn to the next agenda item is new correspondence and public comment at this time. I would call on anyone from the public. I have not received any written correspondence in the in-between times. So I don't have any correspondence. So I'm opening the meeting to public comment. By the way, I want to point out, Mr. Griswold's here, our first selectman. Thank you. I just did the roll call and I got into my little thing here and I didn't see you come in. So Mr. Griswold's in attendance. Okay, so now we're at item 3B, public comment.
John, Tom Meyer here. Are there any other members of the public present?
I'm sorry, you're, again. Okay, seated in the room with us is George Frampton, who is the property owner at 12 Tamhague Road. Mr. Gary Gregory, he was a member of the Conservation Commission. Mr. George Ryan, Vice Chairman, Conservation Commission. And Mr. Paul Reed, resident, 9 Colt Lane. I think I've got everybody. So that's who's in the room. So we're opening to public comment at this point. Who would like to speak? Mr. Frampton.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say something, but I'm not sure whether it's appropriate now or during the discussion or after the discussion. It seemed you had a separate public comment period on the agenda later on.
Well, that's a good point. When we have the members discussing the recommendation, I put it separate because I don't want to have a back and forth dialogue, debate, or whatever. This is your opportunity to say what you'd like to say.
Well, thank you. I just want to say something fairly brief on behalf of quite a few people who actually use this property, that town property that bisects our property, and also on behalf of my family. And I do appreciate very much Tim and members of the commission working with us here, and the recommendation that you have put forward in draft. I just want to say this, and partly for perhaps if there are people on the phone, I don't think this is an issue of public access. It's an issue of vehicular access. It's an issue of access for cars, trucks, and trailers, and parking on this property. At least 99 out of 100 visits to this property, the town property, are people who walk. They're couples who come down. One couple comes every morning. People come with their dogs, their children. When it's warmer, they use the pond, which is on our property. So this is still a pretty natural, peaceful, pristine piece of property. And for those people who walk there and enjoy it, cars, trucks, and trailers parked or turning around or backing up the way is not a positive to public access. It's a negative for them. And of course, it may be a little bit of a negative for their safety and security, but it's also a negative for ours. A few of you know, just as an example, on Saturday, a big truck drove into our driveway, up to our cars, backed up onto the lawn, sat there. When we went out to find out who it was, I think they may have panicked. The guy tried to, basically would have run me over to get away, and we called the police. They were very good. They came, they went and interviewed people. Hopefully it was a mistake, not an attempt at intimidation. But this is the new normal there. So it is a safety and security issue for us. So I would just say that while I'm very grateful for the recommendation that you've tabled, and I hope if it's adopted and accepted by the selectmen that it's going to, be a big step in the right direction. I earnestly want to put before you in the long run the notion that should not be a place to have vehicles going back and forth and parking in a very fragile area where it's hard to turn around. There is plenty of parking out on the pavement, just outside the pillars. There's parking for 3 cars out there without any disturbance at all. The harbor management plan provides that there's a maximum of 1 car should be parked. Your recommendation is to make places for 2. I understand that 1 car is not a regulation, but it was put in there because there's really only room for one car to park at the end, even when it's completely open. So I ask you to consider whether this is really, if you want to improve the quality of the public access for people, it's really something that should be defined so that the parking is out front on the pavement where there's plenty of room and not on the dirt near the wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frampton. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Gregory, Gary Gregory from Conservation Commission member.
Reading Mr. Frampton's letter and his discussion tonight, seems like most of the problem is vehicles getting onto his property. And so I would suggest at the end of that lane we put some boulders there or a fence so that anybody that uses the public access cannot get into his property.
And the boulders placement, are you defining where that is, or are you just saying boulders in general?
I'm just saying, whenever you survey it, you find out where that property line crosses that access driveway, that you block it so no vehicle can get from town property to Mr. Frampton's property.
That's the driveway closest, the part of the driveway that's closest towards the water?
Yes, go straight in, and as it turns around almost to the left there, wherever that property line is, block it. Don't let any vehicles get through there. I would even make it so people can't get through there, because his letter says people are all over his place. I can understand. People all over my place, for months on end, I'd be calling the cops every day, or maybe becoming a cop. I don't know.
All right, thank you for your comments, Mr. Gregory. Anyone else? Mr. Reed?
Yeah, I just want to ask a couple of things. Well, as far as the vehicle access goes, there are a certain number of people, even in our neighborhood, that are elderly and have a little trouble walking down there. But to be able to drive down at the top of the landing there, get a nice view of the river for 5 or 10 minutes, is a real nice respite for them. In the 16 years that we've been living on the street, I have rarely seen a vehicle drive down there. Most of the time we see a vehicle drive down there, they seem to be legitimately on the property. They're contractors that are working whether it was Diana's house or in between. Very rarely. And I think the idea that the commission has for the signage would really make a big difference. I think when vehicles do come down there, it's either somebody that knows about the landing and wants to take a look, or it's somebody that's lost. Because on maps that shows that as being top of Egg Road. So I think the signs would make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Any other comments from the public?
One more comment on Colt Lane. Mr. Frampton said the people on Colt Lane could walk down there. That's a mile. There's a lot of old people on that street that really can't walk that mile. And coming back, it'd be uphill. And what if you have some sort of infirmity, or your wife is in a wheelchair? So I think you're not being very considerate of people on Colt Lane at all.
Mr. Chairman, could I just respond to that quickly?
One more back and forth, but yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I think the long-term solution to this, we would argue, is to park right outside the gate. Yes, people will have to walk 60 yards to get to the end of the lane, although people who want to launch a kayak, although I think that's virtually impossible. I brought pictures of the high tide situation. It's too dangerous for most people even at high tide. But if you have to drive down there to deliver a kayak, it's not a huge problem to go back 40 or 50 yards. So I think that for people who are a mile away and feel like they can't walk a mile, if they can drive to the actual lane and then walk down the lane a few tens of yards, We're not trying to make people walk a mile, only walk 40 or 50 yards on the property itself.
Okay.
And that's not unusual for many pieces of public property.
Thank you, Mr. Frampton. Again, I think we've gotten your we've heard your suggestions about parking outside, and thank you for that point of view. I'd like to call on any other person. Mary Jo, would you like to speak, or are you? I'm just giving the selectmen an opportunity now to have some public comments if they want to.
Thank you, John. This is Mary Jo. I'm joining to listen and in preparation for getting the recommendation, which I read online. And so thank you for the opportunity, but at this point, I am here to learn and listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Mr. Griswold.
I think the issues have been pretty well framed out, and I think the Board of Selectmen will look forward to receiving your recommendations. And I know some of the selectmen have been to the property, so I think they're pretty familiar with the layout and so forth. And I personally remember a number of years ago when there was a presentation when the town hall was being renovated at the church, and a number of residents came to express their opinions about the landing, and it was a very emotional subject. So we know it does spark emotion, and I think once we come up with a solution and things normalize, unfortunately I think Mr. Frampton came to the property after it had been vacant for 2 years plus, and during the bird migration, so that was, two major events that probably have created a lot of this extra traffic. So I think now that they're living in the house and we can get signage up and figure this out properly, I think things will calm down and life will go on as normal, because I think when Johnson was there, I don't remember that she was saying that people coming to the property were a big problem. But as we know, the internet has a lot of information nowadays, so people do learn about it and come to sightsee, which is probably different than it was 10 years ago. But we'll manage, and it's good to hear all this input, so appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griswold. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period, and we're going to turn to the harbor management members for the review on the draft recommendations. If you want to speak, just chip in and announce your name. If you're on the phone, announce your name. If you're in person, just state your name so we know who's talking at this time.
Stephen Ross.
Okay, I recognize Stephen Ross, Vice Chairman. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. The draft recommendations have come about as a result of multiple site meetings at the location, discussions, long discussion over the phone when I was chairman last month with Mr. Frampton, and discussions with the selectmen. I think the draft recommendation that is on the table addresses all the issues in the most equitable fashion possible in order to serve the rights of the public and respect the rights of the property owner. There is really no solution that I can see that will make everybody 100% happy. But I think this is as close to that as I can see us developing. So
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Comments here in the building or on the phone?
This is Bill Harris.
Bill Harris is the treasurer of the Harbor Management Commission. Go ahead.
Is it feasible to restrict it to just Old Lyme residents?
That question was raised, and I asked Mr. Griswold that, and I think it is contrary to public policy that you cannot discriminate against the public in general. Have I got that right, Mr. Griswold?
Yes, you do.
So the answer is no. We cannot discriminate just to public Old Lyme residents.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
John, Tom Meyer.
Okay,
I don't know if we're...
I'm going to recognize Tom Meyer, member of Harbor Management Commission. You're next, Chris. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, John. Sorry, Chris. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if we're planning on going through the draft in order, or you're just taking ad hoc discussion at this point. So if the former is the case, I'll hold my question till farther down. But if not, I have a question about in the boundary section of the discussion. So please let me know what your preference is.
Okay. We'll probably go through it in order, but if you want to put your question on the table, go ahead.
Yeah, basically, it's not a question as much as I just wanted to confirm that we need to perhaps add some consideration. There's some discussion about parking spaces and an area for that. And what I don't know, and so it's kind of a question and a recommendation at the same time, I don't see any reference to anything with respect to space for emergency vehicles or some sort of a situation where you might need to get a fire truck down there or an ambulance or some other kind of larger than a passenger vehicle type of apparatus. I know the reason I'm asking this question, and others on the commission may be familiar when we were looking at in the past we had looked at discussion about having the kayak landing over on the Lieutenant River. There was a lot of discussion, I think, at one point about making sure we had proper access width, I think, of the roadway for emergency vehicles. That popped into my mind when reading this, and I just want to make sure that that's something that we don't need to sort of flesh this out to include.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Chris?
So I have a couple questions on the proposal here, especially boundaries Red B here with placing a boulder to block off the road. That's all terra firma land. There's no concern with erosion. It's been like that for many, many years now. I'm curious, why is that a recommendation being listed there? Is there any evidence of erosion, evidence of a habitat issue with that road there? I think it's beneficial for especially our elderly to be able to get down to the water's edge there. I would understand that the rock that's being proposed is at the water level for safety purposes, but at the top, it's an additional 30, 40, 50 feet that a person would have to go down to get to the water's edge. So I'd like to understand what's the purpose of 3B.
Okay. Chris raises the point of the boulder and the access path. This is not a boulder on the motorized car path. It's the boulder on the access path down to the water. I think there's an issue here whether or not, if I interpreted Chris correctly, whether we place the boulder high up in the path next to the parking area or put the boulder closer to the water just to prevent a vehicle from jumping in the water. One of the issues is it's like dead-end parking. If you put a vehicle down that path to the water and other vehicles park behind it, there's no way out. It's dead end. Certainly, your point about the erosion and the environmental issues are as you approach closer to the water. And I respect the point you made that we just need to block off down by the water. I think the recommendation was made to prohibit additional dead-end parking and possibly looking towards the Framptons' point of view, loitering parking where people backing in and maybe having picnics or doing something on that dead end that's more out of keeping with what we intend for the site.
Yes.
But it's a fair comment. It's open for debate.
So what I would propose is B, say that the rock is down by the water's edge to allow for kayak drop-off, but signage state that there's no parking in that extension so that the parking remains in the designated parking areas, but that area remains open for access to the water for drop-off of kayaks, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. All
Hey,
right.
John, Jeff Meinke.
Okay, Jeff, you have the floor.
So again, recused, but still curious, and I have some, question. Based on what we're talking about now with parking, and I drive down there with my kayak to unload, and I unload, and I say, oh, I'm nuts, I can't park here. How is there the ability in area to turn around to get out, or would you have to back out the entire way at that point?
You would have to back out, Jeff, because it's dead end. We're kind of splitting
well,
here.
I understand. But I mean, so and if there were if people were not parking there, I'm assuming I could back into a space and then turn around and get out. But if people are parking there, I would have to back all the way out.
Correct.
Yeah, it depends on the size of the car if you'd be able to turn around and the three-point turn or not.
Okay.
I can't hear that.
Chris said it depends on the size of the car whether you could do a three-point turn and get yourself out of the narrow access way.
Okay. All right. And I noticed from Mike McGee's comments via email, he had some question about the size of the parking and whatnot.
Okay, we can call him. Mike's here. He can speak to that himself.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. What are your thoughts? I mean, I'm sort of, I guess, again, I'm just bringing up some points. I'm curious if maybe, drop off and pull out and no parking is not sort of a better alternative. But again, not being so familiar, I don't know if that's logical or not.
Okay, Mike McGee here. I'm not sure if you could turn around. I drove down and parked in what I thought was maybe the potential parking area and walked to the water, to the Phragmites and the path that leads to the water. I did not see an easy way to turn a vehicle around. I have a full-size van and a small pickup. Even with a small pickup, I don't think I would try to turn around down there. It could be built without taking up too much space or too much, with some gravel. I think you could have a three-point turn done down there and a sign at the top saying no parking beyond this point would suffice. I found a granite monument in front of about 25 feet or so in front of the doorway to the ice house, like southwest corner of the ice house. I don't know what that represents. I was parked between the monument and the ice house. I had a feeling I was on Mr. Frampton's property at that point. It looked to me, I still have not seen a proper survey of the area. 2 cars is good. It's better than I thought years ago that we had there. 3 would be better as far as I'm concerned. But I'm willing to live with 2. There's in the beginning of one of the number one goals is to maintain the natural appearance. I think the site would require at least twice a year, some mowing and weed whacking, keeping the vines down so it's not an abandoned walkway to the road. I don't think you're going to have enough pedestrian traffic to keep that trail down to the water open. We have another town landing on Smith Neck Road where we have crushed stone leading down to the water through the muck that you see there to the low tide line, and I think something like that would make that an accessible piece of water for kayakers. I was there, I think I was there at mid-tide. It looked to me like not too far out it was paddleable. You only need about 6 inches of water. So I think it's a beautiful site. The kayak committee rated 6 launching areas in the town of Old Lyme. We had 5 different categories for the qualities of those sites. That site got the lowest score, I'll be honest. We had a grading system 1 through 5 with a potential of 30 points per site. That site, Tannenheim Landing, got, I think the average was 14. So it was the lowest, but at that time I didn't know that there was any real parking down there. I thought it was a 10-foot wide strip. I couldn't figure out how the farmers got their wagons turned around with the horse team at the bottom. So with the ability to park a few cars there, it's more of a viable site. It would get a slightly higher score, but I think it'd still be on the bottom. That's about it for me.
Okay, any more comments from the HMC members before we go through this line by line?
I do really quickly, John, if you don't mind. This is Terry Lewis.
Okay.
I've been on the property for probably 37 years. So I was there in 93, and the last 6 years, or 7 years especially, I'm maintaining being part of this property as property manager the last 2 years.
Hold on.
Pretty quick.
You got to mute that mic. Go ahead. Hold on, we're muted. I'm sorry. All right, there was a side discussion going on. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. So, having been down at this property for 37 years and understanding the past 10 years roughly, but the past 3 to 4 years especially, when the property was empty, it was really overrun by a lot of vehicles. So I feel for the owners of 12 Tanzania with how much attention it's gotten down there with swallow season. So to start there, I think that, and go backwards, we should probably help the owners going forward with some of that traffic that once we make this decision. Having been down there for so many years, I'm a firm believer in obviously keeping it open to the public, and I've driven my grandmother down there, and I sit down there and we have a sandwich or so forth, and I understand that that's very important for them to be able to have that opportunity to go down there and use this facility. But I also understand that it's not an easy way to turn around. You can't cut down this beautifully I like the rustic of the preserving the natural integrity of this amazing landing and making, gravel and parking and delineation, but I do believe that there should be a right to be able to go down there and park, and there needs to be a sign on the top when you drive down. You're not even 2 cars into that driveway. You can see down there and see if there's cars there, you need to leave. If there's 2 cars there should be a 2-car parking. It states 2-car parking, and don't let anybody else park more than 2 cars down there, and then they should back up. My concern with backing up is that I've done it a million times where I've gone down there and I see cars down there, and then I start to back up the driveway, but then I look in my rearview mirror and I see people walking down the driveway. So now you have to be really careful with people pulling down and then backing into a pedestrian. There's a lot of back and forth that we have to do on this property to be able to allow the public to use it, but in a safe way, to keep its integrity, to not turn it into a huge park, which I don't believe is the best option for this. But I still think that you should allow parking, but you have to be very careful about how we help them police this. It shouldn't be up to them and how this is policed. I think during swallow season, we have to help these owners somehow. And I think that I don't understand how a town landing, we can't kind of police the fact that if they have a town sticker, as in a beach sticker, or something that delineates, a taxpayer, they should have preference over somebody that's out of town and then pulling down there and not understanding the rules. And if we really spell these rules out, so to speak, to all the townspeople who want to enjoy it, and say 2 at a time, maximum 2 at a time, that's all you get, then everybody in town understands those rules, and then they try to abide by them. But I'm not sure, Mr. Griswold, if you could explain, how a town landing can't be policed, or can it be policed with a sticker system? If they have a town sticker, you have the right to Haynes Park and the beach and other things, can that also be as part of public accesses, but that are town, not state?
Well, we have beach passes, which entitle people to go to town parks and the like. The difficulty will be if somebody comes to the property and parks, and then they go on a kayak. If you come after that, how are you going to get your priority? It would be very difficult to monitor. So I don't think you could say, well, one space is for residents. I mean, you could, I suppose, but the more rules you have, the more enforcement you have, and who's going to do all that enforcement? So
yeah,
I think the best thing would be to move slowly and see how it works, and then react to issues as they arise, rather than trying to solve it all now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, any more comments? Okay, I want to...
Tom Meyer, can you tell... Sorry, John?
Yes, go ahead,
Can
Tom.
you just identify who responded to Terry just now?
I'm sorry, that was Mr. Griswold, the selectman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we set up the goals is to preserve the public access to Tannum Hague Landing, to prescribe some orderly use in these recommendations. The boundaries of orderly use went from 0 parking to maybe 4 spaces. We're at some compromise level of 2. We have to respect the abutting property neighbors' private property, as Terry's pointed out, and help control the public there so that everybody can enjoy it. And we want to maintain the rustic quality of the site, natural appearance, and the vegetation on site. I can't stress enough that in the prelude of most of the Harbor Management Commission's documentation is we have a duty to be good environmental stewards, orderly development of the waterfront, not overdevelop, certainly not do something a site is not capable of doing. As we've heard from Mr. McGee on the commission, the kayak subcommittee did not rate this as a high usability site. It is charming, it's rustic, it has limited amount of use. Mr. Griswold has pointed out many times that going forward, and as Ms. Lewis has pointed out, that there is a situation that might have got out of hand due to vacancy of the house. There's time to make an orderly progress with some positive steps. We don't have to be 100% correct. We just have to go back and revisit at time to time to make sure that if we need to do something different, we can do something different. But going forward, I think taking some affirmative steps to help give the information to the public on how to orderly use the property, and give the public some information about how to respect the abutting property owner, and putting limitations on some of the uses of the property. The recommendation to clearly have access was rooted in Chairman Ross's initial statements way back when. He wrote about the property when it was the Anna Atwood property. Therefore, the clearly defined parking area is a positive step to help the public understand that there is parking down there, but it is limited. As Mr. Frampton's pointed out, there's more than enough access on the Tannenheim turnaround, cul-de-sac, if you want to call it that, but it's not really a cul-de-sac, it's a rotary for some driveways, spurs. People can park there and walk in. The signage recommendation, I think one of the most important things that came out of the discussions was there was people visiting the site at night after sunset. Sunset is defined by the time the sun goes down, and it is consistent with most facilities in the town of Old Lyme that they're closed at sunset. I think this is an important point to make, that we need to have this area shut down at sunset so there's not nighttime use and unknown vehicles down there after dark. Proper signage. I do have a comment that I received about the signage on item 2B, that after the words private drive, if you're looking at the recommendations on the recommendations, Tannenheim Landing, arrow right, private drive, arrow to the left, the comment would be to add the words no entry after the word private drive. That would be more specific a message to people that they're not to enter the private drive. Of course, that doesn't apply to UPS and FedEx. No, that's my attempt. Your boxes were left out by the pillar, by the way, in the Christmas, so it's like. In that same comment on 2C, it says private property do not enter. It could be say do not enter, or it could say no entry. It could be up to the commission whether you want do not enter or no entry. I'm not particular.
I like no entry. It's a little more polite.
No entry is better words in your print? No entry, okay. All right. On the issue of the other issue I heard from Chris, and I want to take it up now, is 3B. It was the matter of the large rock in the center of the off-road access path to the water to prevent motorized vehicle traffic in the narrow lane that leads down to the water. Okay. We know Chris's point of view, the rock should be down by closer to the water. I have the argument that it's a dead-end lane, and if we have two cars parked in the designated parking spots, they'll be boxed in. And I think as far as, we're not calling this a handicap site, and I don't think we can even stretch it anywhere near that definition. But the distance from parking spots to the water is not excessive. So I'm going to have to ask the committee to take I'm going to have to poll the committee on whether the rock is closer to the water or up by there's twin trees at the entrance to the access to that path. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to boil it down to whether the rock should be down by the water or down by up by the twin trees to prevent additional over two cars parking there.
Again, my concern all the time is people, now that he has plants and things on his grass, what happens is they pull up into his driveway, they turn around, and then they start backing down into where the access to the water is. And then they get rid of, whatever they have, their kayaks and or their canoes and so forth. But what happens is if you allow that wide open, I could see we could split the difference maybe just a little bit. the kayak and the canoe, but a lot of it is the backing up and the pedestrians that are down there. It's busier and busier, and then backing up into a pedestrian or somebody not looking, which thank God I do have a camera on my car, because I have to watch the people walking down. So.
I think it boils down to, Terry, whether or not we want to make the plan with signage and backing more complex, or do you want to keep it simple? So I think the high placement of the rock keeps everything simple. Moving the rock down requires more signs that say no parking down here, some sort of enforcement, because it's probably going to be ignored, and then more difficulty of attracting maybe some people with trailers. And we haven't even spoke of trailers, but it's not a trailer-friendly site,
no,
per se.
What I'm saying is if you put it down too low, it's kind of, why bother having it there?
Right.
If you put it up way too high, the 2 parking spots to the top are going to be backing into his driveway. So you have to allow a little bit of space.
No, we measured it. There's adequate room to back out of the parking spaces without encroaching on the land. There was adequate.
I guess based off that discussion, I would like to recommend that there's no rock down that landing. And the reason is because when you park, if there's a rock at the top, your visibility, because of the elevation, you're below elevation a little bit because of the brush to the left, the southern border. So if you can drive down the road, you can go have your lunch and look at the water and have that upfront view. And you can also drop off your sports equipment, your water equipment. And that will, with the rock there, you may have the opportunity to restrict backing up and things like that. So what I would recommend is no rock. The reason I recommend the rock at the bottom is just from a safety standpoint.
That's Chris Staub. Is that what your question was?
No, John, when he's done, may I speak?
Yes, Stephen. Go ahead, finish. Sorry.
No, I think
all right.
Well, I would recommend either no rock or rock at the bottom. I don't care which, but I'd like that access to vehicles to remain open.
Okay, got your point.
That's the main purpose.
Got your point. Okay. All right, you're next, Steve. Go ahead.
I think at this point it would be appropriate to poll the commission to reach a consensus on whether the boulder should be placed closer to the water or in the recommended position. And if you want a motion to have that kind of a vote, I'll be glad to make it.
Yeah, I think I have only heard from a couple people on this issue, so I think we need to poll the commission on this issue. So do we? Well, okay, make a motion.
I'll make a motion to place the boulder in the position that is outlined in the draft recommendation.
Okay. Do we have a second for that?
I second. Bob Faliguera.
So Bob Faliguera is the second there, Mary Ellen. Okay, discussion?
Could you repeat the motion? It's so hard to hear.
Okay. The motion from Steve Ross, I'm going to paraphrase it, is to accept the recommendation as written in the draft recommendations that we place the rock up by the entrance to the off-road path, meaning having the rock placed high enough to not allow cars to drive down the path.
Yeah, blocking vehicular access to the water. Right.
Okay. Any more discussion? I'll call a vote. Members of the commission, let's see. If I'll call for the, who is in agreement with the recommendation? Just sing out tell me your name.
Tom Meyer agrees.
Okay, next.
Bill Harris agrees.
Harris agrees. Ross agrees. Who else?
Falguera agreed.
Falguera. Mark?
Yes, I agree.
Agreed.
I agree.
Disagree.
Okay.
It's against our action in the top of the letter.
Okay.
It's blocking public access.
Okay.
I've been there with you many times.
Okay. You've got that vote, Mary Ellen. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Very good. Moving on.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Sorry. I'm still new here. Go ahead. Who wanted to speak?
Well, I make a motion that if there's no further discussion on the draft recommendations, that we forward the recommendations as written to the Board of Selectmen, the sole exception being the one sign that says private property will add the words no entry.
I think I have more discussion points on the observations I'd like to bring up. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. I've got a motion on the table. You can discuss that in discussion. Anybody second Steve's motion?
Second, Bob Falguera.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, Chris, now discussion. Go ahead.
So in observation number 2, it's not an observation if we're saying that we're not recommending something. That's a recommendation by the fact that we're not recommending. So like number 2 in observations to be straight from the recommendation. Number 1 and 2 are acceptable.
Okay.
Or 1 and 3 rather, sorry.
Okay, 1 and 3 are acceptable. Chris is objecting to number 2 is not a recommendation. During this debate, the history of this comment, during this debate, at the initial December 8th meeting, and I believe at other meetings at the Conservation Commission meeting on January 5th, I was questioned, or we were questioned, about the feasibility of dredging. The observation is just there for the placeholder to say that this is not a candidate for dredging. Dredging is a very extensive process of permitting and financial obligation for commercial purposes. This is a recreational site. It's in a preserve, the Lord's Cove Preserve, and it's just not on the table at all to dredge this site. So that's the reason it was there. If it doesn't have to be in these observations, Chris, you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be here. It was just a placeholder.
Yep, no, understandable. And I'm not saying that I object to that. I agree that we should not be adding value, adding dollars to the lending in that area. But if we're making a recommendation, we should make recommendations. If that's going to be a not recommendation, it should be up ahead out of the observations. And but I don't think we're there. I think the observations that were stated in number 1 and 3 are appropriately labeled as observations. Number 2 is not a recommendation, and therefore a recommendation not to do something. And I think it should be removed or voted into the upper area.
Okay, I like that suggestion. We can move observation number 2 under its own 5th bullet called Waterfront Improvement, which is out of the jurisdiction of the selectmen, but it's like I'm okay with moving it up to.
And that's really why I think it should just be removed. It's out of our jurisdiction. It's out of jurisdiction. You know, like you said, we would need to do extensive research to understand the cost, the benefit, if we could get a grant for it, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think it belongs in this recommendation.
I'm okay with getting rid of it. There's no reason not to. Steve, would you modify your motion to delete observation number 2 is not necessary?
would say that it's not a bad idea to leave it in there, but move it up and make it recommendation number 5.
Out of jurisdiction.
It was merely information for the selectmen. It's not a jurisdictional thing, but I'm not.
It could be handled either way then. Perhaps just, I'm not saying delete it, but I don't see any reason not to pass along the observations with the recommendations as informational points.
Okay,
I'd
so.
like to pose a question to the selectmen. Are you asking for recommendations or observations?
I think it would be helpful to have the opinion of the commission about number 2, maybe as a recommendation, because it has come up, and I think in as much as it's in the water, it could be 2 could be a final thing called recommendation. HMC recommends that no, make it that way instead of a negative.
Okay.
And do we have enough information to make that recommendation? Have we done the research on potential grants, on potential DEP approval, et cetera, et cetera? I don't think we have that information to even make that recommendation, and that's why it's in the observation category.
It's not on the foreseeable future of the HMC to make any move to add dockage, dredging in that area. I think the observation was to help down the road with the Board of Selectmen clarify for people who wanted to make the site something more than it really is. But there is nothing in our foreseeable future, meaning this year coming up. And I feel comfortable making the recommendation that we're not pursuing this on any of our agendas. So therefore, I'm gonna call the vote with the Steve. I just want to modify just your motion to discuss. If you would modify your motion to replace that observation into the body, it'll be a recommendation.
All right, we'll add that to the motion where I mentioned the signage, and the second change would be to move observation number 2 into the recommendation section as recommendation number 5. Just as an aside, by the way of discussion, over the years I've received numerous inquiries about dredging that area. It would be, and I feel confident in saying this, virtually impossible to receive approval from DEP, Army Corps of Engineers, any other regulatory body to dredge that area.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Under the discussion, I'm going to recognize Mr. Griswold again.
I might point out at the beginning, there is a thing called recommendations 1 and 2. And in 1, it talks about, well, actually up above that, it says to preserve the rustic quality, natural appearance, all that. So I suppose one could put as a, after vegetation, maybe you could put that thing under vegetation as opposed to having yet another recommendation section in addition to the one above.
Or really, it really falls into number 4, vegetation also, that we're not recommending any clearings, plantings, etc. Sites to remain natural and its rustic character.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, we're going to roll it into number 4.
Yep.
Just strike it, it's already included. Would be my recommendation.
Yep.
All right. So there we have it. The modification to the motion was to add the do not enter or no entry, and to roll the number 2 observation into number 4. Any other discussions? I'm going to call the vote. Let's have a roll call vote, starting with the people in the room here.
Yeah, I'd like to approve the recommendation.
Okay, that's McGee is approved. Terry? Approve. Chris, Staub, myself approve. On the phone, Mr. Ross? Mr. Fulgara?
Approved.
Mr. Beatty?
Approved.
Mr. Harris?
Approved.
Mr. Meinke? Oh, you're not voting, sorry. Mr. Meyer?
Approved.
Did I miss anybody? Motion carries. I believe that concludes our business here.
A comment. Mr. Frampton brought this picture to include in your record. Is this high tide, sir? That's high tide. High tide?
Okay. All right. That concludes the meeting. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. Okay, all approve? Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. Appreciate your calling in. Thank you for your time and attendance in the special meeting.
Thank you for all the time this morning. It was a lot of time.
I'm hanging up, Steve.
I appreciate the time. This is not probably what you want to be doing this evening, but anyway.
Yeah, we want to get this right.
Well,
We want to get this right. Thank you for your pictures.
yeah, thank you.
Hey, when are we going to get our shot, man? You over 75? Soon. I'm over 80.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good job.
I guess actually over 75.
Three different meetings.
Well, yeah, we got. Are you erasing it? Oh.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Somehow. Yeah,
I don't know, they got all these stupid buttons.
they do. I shut off the.